For epilepsy, there is hope. Hey podcast listeners, Tori Robinson here for Epilepsy Sparks Insights, a podcast about epilepsy, epilepsy research, common comorbidities and all of the fascinating science behind it. Whether you have epilepsy, are a family member, a neurologist, neuropsychiatrist, therapist, neurophysiologist, scientist or researcher, Epilepsy Sparks Insights is designed to help you learn more about epilepsy from the other side of the table. I'm a person with epilepsy and some missing brain tissue. I hope to help bridge the unnecessary gap between patients, the public, and the aforementioned. Because epilepsy research and science are cool. In the last episode, featuring Dr. Jim Morrow, we discussed the sodium valproate / epilim debacle, what has been learnt, and what changes are still being implemented to minimise risk to families both now and in the future. This week on the programme, we are talking to Tolu Olanyan, who is a Learning Disabilities Nurse specialising in epilepsy and is also CEO of Pretola Global Health Consulting. Over the past year, Pretola has been providing unique online training in epilepsy for both clinicians and charities in low to middle income countries. To learn more, don't go anywhere, stay with us. Hello everybody, I'm love to introduce you today, the most wonderful, fabulous Tolu Olanyan. Tolu and I are actually friends, but we also work together professionally. So Tolu, please tell everybody about yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Tolu Olanyan and I am a registered learning disability nurse with a special interest in epilepsy and also the CEO of Pretola Global Health Consulting Limited.
Gosh, what titles. I love this. So Tolu, tell us how you got into the work that you do and also how you ended up specialising in epilepsy, because we have lots, well, not enough learning disability nurses, but yours is quite specific. So tell us how this came about.
My journey into epilepsy actually started years ago, before my family and I relocated into the United Kingdom.
From where?
From Nigeria. So I was born in Nigeria, I grew up in Nigeria. And then I remember growing up, we would watch movies of people having seizures done in the Nigerian context then. And the impression we got then was it was lizard moving around people's brain, whenever they're having seizure, that there's something moving around in their brains. And anytime this lizard moved around in their brain, they would have a seizure. And I remember thinking then, how did the lizard get into their brains? Because in Nigeria, you would see lizard around, kind of things. And though they don't live in your house, but you see them out and about. And I used to wonder, how did these little creatures how can they get into someone's brain? And then I remember a particular incident. My dad was driving. My dad was a teacher, and my mom was a nurse in Nigeria. And we were driving along on the road, and someone was having a seizure in the middle of the road. So all we knew was we saw loads of people just running off. It was like there was a riot, and people were just running, scared. So my mom told my dad to slow down and wait. And then she saw that there was someone on the floor. And being a nurse, so she told my dad to stop and she went to support this person on the floor. So my dad got out as well to help her, locked me in the car so nothing would happen to me. So I was watching from behind the car to see what was going on. At this point, everyone had left this young man on the floor. You could see he was having a jerking movement. He was having a seizure. And my mom supported him. He later recovered, got up and ran off quickly. My parents later came back into the car, so I asked them what that was all about. And my mom said he was having a seizure, but she knew what to do. So he was having a seizure. And then my dad said something that I would never forget. He said, he was one of his students. That boy was one of his students. So my dad knew him. We didn't know who he was when we stopped. We didn't know, my dad didn't know his identity. We just knew that there was someone on the floor having an event. My parents went to help him. But imagine if my parents had not stopped before my dad now realized, oh, I actually know him. But he got up quickly and ran off due to the embarrassment and the situation he found himself. So he left. So that memory was stuck with me. It stuck with me over the years until when we moved to, the UK, and then I got into learning disability nursing.
How do you get into it? Why would you choose to specialise in learning disability nursing?
Oh, learning disability nursing. You need to blame my uncle for that. So, my uncle, that's my mom's younger brother, is a physiotherapist, and he works and lives with his family in the Republic of Ireland. So, he lives in a small county, a beautiful county in the Republic of Ireland, and he's a chief physiotherapist there. And he actually works in an establishment for people with learning disabilities. So he works with people with children and adults with learning disabilities in there. So I've always wanted to be like him because he's my one of my best uncles. So I always wanted to be like him. So I wanted to be a physiotherapist.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So when um, I completed, when I was about to complete my UCAS application, then I told him, I said, look, I'm going to do physio. I'm going to put up my application. I'm going to put my application in for physiotherapy. And he said, why don't you look into learning disability nursing? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is all about. And he said, go look into it because I had no cell of recognition for it. I didn't know what learning disability was. I had absolutely no clue about what it was. So he said, go look it up. You would love it. And then I went online, looked it up, did a bit of my Google search, and I was just blown away. I just could not imagine, um, you know, I was just so blown away by what I learned, and I felt, okay, this is it for me. At that point, it wasn't about epilepsy, it was about the fact that I wanted to know more about people with neurodisabilities, autism, Down syndrome. It was completely new, foreign to me. I'd never seen, to my best of recollection, I don't think I've seen a child with autism. Growing up, I didn't have a clue people like that exist until when um, I started thinking of my career. So I saw it and I was like, wow, I want to know more. And that's it about me. I always want to know more. As soon as I get into a topic of I want to know more, I'll be into it. So I put in my application and got admitted into University of Southampton, started my nursing degree in 2009. And it was when I was doing my nursing degree that I realized, oh my goodness, epilepsy was a big, big issue in the sense that it was a common comorbidity with people with learning disabilities and autism.
Isn't it funny though? People will say that person's got autism, or that one person will say I've got autism or learning disabilities, but they would never say they have epilepsy as well. It's almost like that was a hanger-on thing, and still something even within medicine. I think that was not spoken of so much, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a huge stigma around it. I've heard parents say, not here in the UK, when I've gone to teach or train in other countries, I've heard parents say that they would rather prefer their child have a diagnosis of autism than a diagnosis of epilepsy. you know and that in itself, it makes you start to think, why would a parent prefer one diagnosis over the other when their child might have both?
And also, that's far too broad a generalization, isn't it? That's far too broad a generalization because, okay, where are they on the autism scale, and where are they in terms of epilepsy as well? You can't say, it's like sexuality, isn't it? You can't say, oh, everybody is exactly the same.
It's the fear of not wanting to accept that diagnosis of epilepsy. So that was how I got into
Yeah.
epilepsy anyway. Um and then I realized, like I said, it was very common in the group of children and adults I came in contact with during my nursing training, and that brought back the memory of my childhood memory around epilepsy, and I wanted to know more about it. So fortunately, I was fortunate to have mentors during my nursing training that were really interested in epilepsy. So they saw that I was quite inquisitive about it. I asked loads and loads of questions. So I would, get involved in loads of activities around epilepsy assessments, monitoring patients and supporting families training. And that was when I met Kim Morley when she was working in Southampton then. And I would tag along in her clinics, just wanted to learn more around it. And then when I finished my nursing degree, when I was about to wrap up my nursing degree, I knew that I still wanted to acquire more knowledge around epilepsy diagnosis and management. So I applied for my master's in King's College, and that was when King's College was still running the epilepsy slash epileptology MSc degree, MSc program. And I applied for it then, started it almost immediately, finishing my nursing degree. And that's my history around it.
What would you say is like your purpose now with that sort of background? And I mean, I know we've already sort of said, you especially, that it's a continuous learning experience. The more we find out about epilepsy and indeed autism and learning disabilities, you're like, oh my god, you become like a sponge trying to take in all this information. But where are you kind of like now? And also I'd love to, and no doubt listeners would love to hear about how you are kind of in a way going back to your roots, but it's rather glamorous in a way, I'd say, that you're based over here, but you have set up this wonderful organization called Pretola, which is helping people in developing countries as well. Tell us a bit about that and where you are now.
I'm a bit of an interesting one. I don't like to put myself into a box. Basically, you can define me in different areas depending on which context or which country or whatever you're trying to. So you can't just I'm not one person. Even I myself struggle to define myself in a particular say, okay, this is everything about me just now. That's because my interest varies, and that's because I'm so interested in
Yeah.
epilepsy and neurodisability. Everything about neurodisability, call it learning disability or intellectual disability, autism, because growing up, when I sit back and reflect about the environment I grew up in, I wonder what happened to those children. Because, like I said, I never saw any growing up. And if we did, because it was later that I started thinking about some of the people we would see in the middle of the streets begging for alms and things like that. And because they're physically disabled, I had a conversation with my uncle, being he's a physiotherapist and he works, we're kind of both in the same field. And he said, look, a lot of those children had cerebral palsy.
Right. There's a huge number of people, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but then they either didn't get the right diagnosis and they didn't get the right help and the right treatments and the right therapy needed. And there they are on the streets, not being able to go to school, begging for alms and selling petty things just to be able to feed themselves. And so I started thinking, that's why I had to sit back and go, why have I not seen these people? Why did I not come in contact? And then I thought, hang on,
Where are they hidden,
what
right?
are they eating? And then I'm like, oh yeah, actually I remember seeing some on the streets, but I didn't know what it was. So I want to kind of bring out these hidden kids out into the light. As to say, there's a problem here. Let's stop hiding people. And so thinking now, in now things are getting better because organizations are springing up and information, people are getting to know more about this, children with neurodisabilities, but it's not quick enough. It's still not fast enough, and there's still a lot to do. So I want to do my epilepsy thing. I'm still doing my epilepsy thing, but I still also want to champion the learning disability and autism aspect. So I'm into a whole lot of stuff, and that's why it first started when I became the chair for medical assist in Sierra Leone. At that point, I was a trustee member. Later, I'm now the chair of this charity, and actually, I love what we do with it because it's a UK registered charity that provides medical access to people in Sierra Leone. I'm not a Sierra Leonean, but Nigeria and Sierra Leone, they're like two countries not far apart in West Africa.
Have you been to Sierra Leone before? Oh, because you have visited, haven't you?
I have visited Sierra Leone and I realized we actually have a whole lot in common than I ever
The
knew.
thing is, though, you say we, I presume that you're referring to Nigeria and Sierra Leone. But the thing is,
Nigerians and Sierra
yeah,
Leoneans.
but come on, humans, we have so much in common no matter our continent. And I think that that's something which is yet to be
Definitely.
recognized by the majority. So we have people in the UK with epilepsy, cerebral palsy, autism, Downs. We have them in Sierra Leone. We have people just like us in Nigeria, etc., etc. I think it's just not just, but I think culture has a huge thing to do with how people are treated, how people are cared for. Then you have other things within society, of course, impacting people in different ways in terms of things like financing or lack thereof, or government intervention. And I guess these things can't be changed overnight. But something that I've noticed is that since lockdown, especially, so many of us have come together from these different countries, right? And we're saying, okay, these things are awful. And, obviously, like in the UK, I'm always a bit worried about sounding a bit patronizing, like, oh gosh, I empathize. But the thing is, people don't take it that way because they know that we would not be reaching out if we didn't care. And we can just do so much more together. We can all learn from each other. That's a huge thing, the education. And I think that's kind of something that you truly recognize, being that glamorous, person in between both continents, darling. You realize, okay, what can we do with this? And that's where Pretola comes in, I believe. Is that right?
That's where Pretola comes in, really, because it was when I got to Sierra Leone that I did some work there. And then I went back to Nigeria. I've
Mm.
been back, to Nigeria, and I realized actually the need is global. It is global indeed. A lot of times we talk about this global
Right.
thing, the gaps and epilepsy gaps and all that. But actually, it's we know that epilepsy is one of the most common neurological condition globally. But until when you're in these
Yeah.
countries, similar, countries of low and middle income countries, before you actually realize the gaps, you can read up on it, but actually
Yeah.
you need to be in there to see it yourself, to hear it yourself, to feel it
Hmm.
yourself that, actually we have a massive issue
Yeah.
here. And that's why I started Pretola as to, okay, how can a, a young lady that was born in Nigeria, grew up in Nigeria, and has been blessed, to live here in the UK, practice here in the UK, I'm settled here, live here with my family and all, be able to do work with, support countries that have this, this massive gap. And I know, putting my hat on, so putting my Nigerian hat on and my British hat on, the gap is wide. Okay. The gap, there's no middle ground. There's no middle ground. The gap is wide there. You see countries in some of these lower middle income countries, especially the low, economic countries, they don't even have an EEG. They don't have an EEG machine. They don't even have access to meds. And when they have access to some medication, some of their clinicians don't know how to support the people. They're using the little knowledge they have, um, because they've not had access to more of the specialist training that we have access to here in developed countries. So it's, how can I bridge that gap? What can I give back? What can I do in my own little way? And how can I get my colleagues, my fantastic colleagues here, to also support that as well? I know a lot of, clinicians. I know of people like Kim Molly that have Kim actually is an epilepsy specialist nurse midwife. That is my mentor and my colleague as well. And I know she's passionate about countries like that. She's been to Ethiopia a couple of times. I know of people, other nurses and doctors that are passionate, but they can't maintain that because they've also got their practice here. So how can I bridge that gap? That's why um, that's one of the things we've set up through Pretola to develop the specialist training, not just for epilepsy alone, but also neurodisability training for clinicians, delivered by clinicians. So it will be clinicians in developed countries and other, getting an array of clinicians to actually support their peers in other parts of the world that are struggling and need more knowledge, actually by just, supporting them through virtual training. And that has been helping. That's the feedback we've had with the first training we've done has been so encouraging that I don't want it to stop. We're not stopping.
Well, it's not going to stop. And I would say, I'd like to say, through my experience with you and Pretola, because that something I think that makes you so, and Pretola so different, gosh, I sound like I'm so bigging you up, but I love it, right? Is that, you just mentioned clinicians only, but that is not the only part of the training that you offer. I think you may be involving some marvelous people affected by epilepsy. Is that not true?
Definitely, I love. I'm a big advocate of co-production, working with people with lived experience. I am a nurse. I've got my degree. I've got my master's degree in and all that, but I still haven't had I don't have epilepsy. Okay. And I don't, it's not like I
Mm.
want to have it. I don't have epilepsy. I can talk from it. I can empathize. I can work with families around it, but I still do not have the condition, the lived experience around the condition or neurodisability and all that. That's why
Mm.
it's important that we get the voices of people with these conditions. They need to be involved because we can't. I don't like seeing people as just patients. They're not just patients. They're not just someone with the condition. There's so much more about them and their families and people around them. They need to have a voice where they can impute into policies, into making a change with others. So our training, all the training we're putting together, especially the international ones, which are more of the longer term. So usually they're like 3 months training, virtual training. We involve people with lived
Hmm.
experience. We like the next one we're putting together would have a mother with a child of epilepsy, because we want people to hear from the parents' point of view how it's impacted on them, their thoughts processes, and how it impacted on the family, and how much they had to, how far they had to go to get the help their child needed. We've got adults, a woman with epilepsy. We've got someone like Tori Robinson speaking to people, teaching. We've got we're linking up with a father, trying to get his experience as to how his journey into fatherhood whilst living with epilepsy himself. We're trying to get all that because we want people to see from the other point of view, in the sense that in some countries, all they see when they look at their children, their child with epilepsy, they think, oh, life is over for that child. That child
Right,
cannot become
exactly.
anything. They can't have an education, they can't have a family. But that's not necessarily true. That's not true, because we have people with epilepsy in high governments, in employed, and they are employers themselves. We have mothers, they've gotten married, they've had children. Yes, it might need a bit of more work, support from their specialists, their doctors. But my goodness, it's not impossible. So we want them to hear from that point of view and learn from it. And I'll just quickly, if Tori does not mind me saying this, the last training we did, the epilepsy assessment management course. So we call it the EAMC. That's our 3 months international epilepsy course. And Tori taught during Tori session. And I'm not just saying this because Tori is my friend. No, I'm actually saying that because it was a powerful session indeed. The feedback we had, bear in mind, a lot of people that joined that most people that registered for the course did not know Tori from, they'd never heard of Tori before, and they're from different countries. We have people from um, Haiti, we had people from Zambia, Cameroon, Nigeria, 12 different countries, you know, register for the training. And they from week one in January up onto the last week, all the weeks they learned from all the experts, all the professionals that came to teach, to share their knowledge. From the beginning, we started from what is epilepsy, from basics to history taking. How do you take history? How do you take accurate medical history, and up onto diagnosis, differential diagnosis, and a whole lot, women and epilepsy, and different topics, 12 topics, up until we did Tori's session. And that was just like an icing, a tasteful, delicious icing on the cake, to crown it all,
Delicious.
because the feedback we had, it made the clinicians start to think about, these people are not just people you give medication to. They are human beings. They are not robots. You don't just tell them, oh, take this morning and night time, and that's it. There are other aspects about their lives that you need to be concerned about. You need to look into the stigma associated with their condition. How do you support them? The mental health issues associated around the condition. What help do they need? And how are they coping with their families? And I nearly cried during our session because I'd known Tori for some time. She had kind of shared bits and bits of her story with me, but I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard it from the beginning to the end, up until that day. And I just thought, oh my goodness, she's such a lovely, fantastic lady to have overcome the odds, and yet she's still here. So that's the kind of experience I want people to get from our training, that as a clinician you get that from the patient perspective, and then the next cohort, which is more open to caregivers, advocates, teachers, anyone that wants to learn about epilepsy, they also learn that there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and I think what's so lovely about the course as well is we are saying that we understand that sometimes they'll feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel, and then say you could have a really awful down period where you have a cluster of seizures, then that light understandably disappears, but it will pop up again because your clinicians are there to help you. The people that we are also educating, being families, they are going to be there to help you too, because they are looking at your epilepsy and often mental health issues associated through a different lens. And this education is absolute power for people, whether they're people with the diagnosis, whether they are carers, family members, or whether they be clinicians, as we were just speaking of, but also charity members and founders, because we're going to have a lot of people from charities from different countries attending, aren't we? Because I think often in mid to low income countries, or the other way around, often the people that speak to those affected by epilepsy are people from charities rather than family members. So they're a key part of the whole puzzle, right?
Yeah, definitely. They are. We need to empower people. We want the charity advocates to go out there with confidence. We want them to go out there being able to answer questions. We want them to go out there empowered with the right tools that they need to be able to actually make epilepsy a priority in our countries. We're encouraging them to go out there to advocate for epilepsy, but we need to empower them to do that. And really, the work is huge. I always say that epilepsy is not one man's problem. And my dad would, this is actually because my dad would say that the heavens will fall down is not the problem of one person. because we're all under here. So if the heavens falls down, it's going to fall on you in London and on me where I am.
It's the ripple effect. If one person has epilepsy and is feeling depressed or has seizures, or even if the seizures are controlled, the fact that you never know what's going to happen, the people that love you, whether they're able to talk about it or not, they're going to be
It's going to
affected.
affect everyone.
There is, it's just totally ripple and affects the whole of society and even economies. It
Exactly.
affects. So and it's never just that one person, as we know. There are loads. It's as you were saying, one of the most common neurological conditions in the whole world. So it's something that we have to be talking about.
It's time to stop having these conversations in silo. It's time to stop having this conversation as to,
Right.
it only concerns that ministry. It only concerns them. It only concerns the health ministry. No, it concerns employer, it concerns education ministry, it concerns family, it concerns, and also human rights issues. It concerns everyone.
Indeed.
That's why the conversations need to be had. We need to be having those conversations across board. The issues around stigma cannot be resolved. Cannot We can't tackle it without everyone sitting on board. And that's why I always say that it's a puzzle. We all need to come together to get the grand picture, to get everything, to make this puzzle together. Everyone needs to come together, play their part. But we can only do that when people know what they're doing. And that is by training.
Yes. And do you know what you're also making me think? World Health Organization, quite literally, they need to be made more aware of the impact of epilepsy and how severe it can, or how severely it can affect people's lives. Even statistics that we read on certain professional pages, the statistics are well out of date. It is a bit crazy. So, and also kind of following on what you were saying before, rather than us having our tiny little silos in many different places, let's take the education you're so wonderfully offering us all, both clinicians, patients, etc., and work as one. And granted, we have different cultures which affect us differently, but we should all be singing from that same hymn sheet and saying, okay, here are us lot impacted, or our family members, whatever, impacted by epilepsy. Let's have the same message, the same level of education, bring that together and impact not just the country, but the world in a positive way.
Exactly. Imagine if we could have the big pharmas, the pharmaceutical companies, those that make these medications, the anti-seizure medications, they need to put their money where their mouth is, in the sense that you're making this medication, but we actually need people to be trained to be able to use the medication right. We need people. So you're not just there to, make medication, sell it, but actually we're there to empower people. So they need to get involved as well. And that's why we have organizations like the OWP Rowe Foundation supporting this, because they understand the need for training, the need for education. So we want other organizations, other pharmaceutical organizations, get on board. This concerns you, you know, this concerns every one of us. Novartis.
UCB, GSK, and rest assured, we are very appreciative of any help that comes in, because the situation we're in at the moment is, as you were saying, like Ray Foundation, etc., who are providing these drugs, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. But we only have limited drugs that are available, and we know that lots of people affected by epilepsy can only take certain drugs, or only certain drugs will be effective. And also, these drugs are not things that can just be taken for a couple of weeks and then you're all good. They're things that have to be taken indefinitely. And if you suddenly stop a drug because it's you've run out of it, you don't have access to it, you're kind of welcoming lots of seizures and even possibly SUDEP as well, which is something which we will touch on. And I think I did in my training as well a bit, because people are at much higher risk of SUDEP in mid to low income countries, as well as additional accidents, because they tend to not have their seizures controlled. But things are on the up because, well, we're having this conversation. So please, people, if you've got any questions at all, you know that you can send them over to Tolu or I, and if we can't answer them, we'll forward you on to the right person. And so, Tolu, how should people contact you?
People can contact us. We're on social media. We also have our website, which is Tori, I'm sure Tori will put it out as well. But I'll just say, if you can go on Google, type in Pretola Global Health and Consulting, we're there. We're on social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram, and we're actually all out there to provide training. So our training is not just international. We also provide training in the UK as well. So, but yeah, you can find us, and I'm sure Tori, you'll be able to help us put our information out there for people to be able to access us.
Yeah, it'll be underneath this video or this podcast, because we've got both here. But anyway, this is all brilliant stuff, and there's nothing else like this really in the world, connecting people internationally. So it's been lovely having you, Tolu, and no doubt we will have you again. And perhaps have an update this time next year or even in 6 months to find out more about what's been going on and how things have developed, because things are changing so quickly in a positive way. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Today I thank Tolu Olanyan for her time and for making us aware of the clear need for training in epilepsy in low to middle income countries, and indeed the services that she is providing through Pretola. For more information on Tolu and her global work, you can find links in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn or Facebook, and we'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts about today's show. Do subscribe to our podcast and know that we are always trying to improve what we are doing here for the programme. I'm Tori Robinson. Thanks for listening.